Hi, I am Dr. Harrington, and today I'll talk about something that most people overlook until it's too late: early signs of dementia. Now let's break it down. Dementia doesn't begin with dramatic memory loss like you see in movies. It doesn't start with someone forgetting their family or getting completely lost overnight. It begins quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. And that's exactly why so many people miss it. In fact, some of the earliest signs are often dismissed as just aging, stress, or even personality quirks. But the truth is, catching these signs early can make a massive difference in slowing progression, managing symptoms, and preserving quality of life. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 early warning signs of dementia that most people ignore, and by the end of this, you'll see things very differently. 1. Subtle memory slips that disrupt daily life. 6. Let's start with the most obvious, but also the most misunderstood, sign: memory loss. Now everyone forgets things occasionally. Misplacing your keys once in a while? That's normal. But early dementia-related memory loss is different. It's persistent. It starts interfering with daily life. You may notice things like repeatedly asking the same questions, forgetting recently learned information, relying heavily on reminders or family members, losing track of important dates or events. Here's the key difference. It's not just forgetting. It's not remembering that you forgot. For example, someone might have a conversation and then ask the exact same question 10 minutes later as if it never happened. This is often associated with conditions like Alzheimer's disease, where short-term memory is affected first. What makes this dangerous is how easily it's dismissed. Maybe I'm just tired. I've been stressed lately. It's just age. But if these patterns repeat consistently, it's not something to ignore. 2. Difficulty planning or solving problems. 6. The second early sign is something people rarely connect to dementia: trouble with planning and problem solving. This includes tasks that used to feel automatic, things like managing finances following a recipe, keeping track of monthly bills, completing familiar work tasks. Suddenly, these tasks feel harder, not impossible, but noticeably more difficult. Someone might make frequent mistakes with numbers, take much longer to complete simple tasks, lose focus halfway through. This isn't about intelligence. It's about how the brain processes steps, sequences, and logic. Dementia begins affecting the brain's executive function, your ability to plan, organize, and execute actions. And because this change happens gradually, many people don't realize it's happening. They just think, I'm getting slower. But it's not just slowness. It's a shift in cognitive processing. 3. Confusion with time or place. 6. The third sign is deeply unsettling and often ignored until it becomes serious. Losing track of time or place. This can show up in subtle ways at first. Forgetting what day it is, losing track of seasons, struggling to follow time-based routines. Then it progresses. Forgetting where you are, getting confused in familiar places, not remembering how you got somewhere. Imagine walking into a room and forgetting why you're there. That happens to everyone. But now imagine that happening constantly. Or worse, being in your own neighborhood and suddenly feeling like you don't recognize it. This is because dementia begins to affect orientation, your brain's ability to anchor you in time and space. And when that anchor weakens, confusion follows. 4. Trouble finding words or following conversations. 9. The fourth sign is often brushed off as just forgetting a word, but it's more than that. Language difficulties are a major early indicator of dementia. This can include pausing frequently during conversations, struggling to find the right words, calling objects by the wrong name, losing track of what you're saying. For example, someone might say, "Pass me the thing you write with," instead of simply saying pen, or they might stop mid-sentence and not know how to continue. Even more concerning is difficulty following conversations. They may lose track of what others are saying, struggle in group discussions, withdraw from conversations altogether over time. This can lead to social isolation, not because they want to withdraw, but because communication becomes exhausting. 5. Changes in mood, personality, or behavior. 7. The fifth sign is one of the most overlooked: and one of the most important, changes in mood or personality. This is where dementia doesn't just affect memory, it affects who someone is. You might notice increased anxiety or fear, irritability or anger, depression or withdrawal. Sudden mood swings. Someone who was once calm might become easily frustrated. Someone social might start avoiding people. Someone confident might become fearful or suspicious. Why does this happen? Because the brain areas responsible for emotion and behavior are being affected. And often, the person doesn't understand what's happening to them. Imagine feeling confused, but not knowing why. That confusion turns into fear, and fear often turns into anger or withdrawal. This is why families sometimes say, they're not the same person anymore. Why most people miss these signs. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't miss these signs because they're hidden. They miss them because they explain them away. They say, it's just aging. They've always been like this. It's stress. And sometimes, it is. But when these signs appear together, or worsen over time, that's when you need to pay attention. Because early detection matters. What you should do. If you notice these signs, if you recognize any of these symptoms in yourself or someone you love, don't panic. But don't ignore it either. The first step is simple. Talk to a doctor. Early evaluation can include cognitive testing, medical history review, brain imaging if needed. And here's the key. Not all memory problems are dementia. Some are reversible. Vitamin deficiencies, thyroid issues, medication side effects, depression, but you won't know unless you check. The power of early action. Catching dementia early doesn't cure it, but it changes everything. It allows better treatment planning, slower progression in some cases, lifestyle adjustments that protect brain health. Simple habits can make a difference. Regular physical activity, mental stimulation, healthy diet, social interaction. These don't eliminate risk, but they help the brain stay stronger for longer. Chapter 6. The signs you only notice in hindsight. Here's something that almost every family says at some point. Now that we look back, the signs were there. And that's what makes early dementia so dangerous. It doesn't feel obvious in the moment. It feels like small, disconnected incidents. A forgotten appointment here, a repeated question there, a strange mood swing that seems out of character. Individually, they don't seem alarming, but together, they form a pattern. And the human brain is wired to normalize patterns, especially when they involve people we love. We don't want to believe something is wrong, so we explain it away. But hindsight has a way of connecting the dots that we ignore in real time. And by the time those dots form a clear picture, the condition has often progressed further than it should have. Chapter 7. The compensation phase. When people hide the symptoms. One of the least talked about stages of early dementia is what I call the compensation phase. This is when the brain is already struggling, but the person is still functioning well enough to hide it. They develop coping mechanisms without even realizing it, writing everything down obsessively, avoiding complex conversations, letting others take over responsibilities, sticking to strict routines to reduce confusion. To an outsider, it may look like organization or preference, but underneath, it's compensation. They're adapting to a decline they can feel, but may not fully understand. This is also why early dementia can go unnoticed for years, because the person isn't obviously failing. They're adjusting, quietly. And sometimes they're deeply aware something isn't right, but they don't know how to express it. Chapter 8. When intelligence masks the problem. Another reason early dementia is missed. Highly intelligent individuals often mask it better. They have stronger cognitive reserves, better vocabulary, more advanced problem-solving skills. So when decline begins, they can compensate longer. They may use humor to deflect mistakes, change topics mid-conversation, rely on general statements instead of specifics. For example, instead of saying, "I forgot the name of that person," they might say, "You know who I mean," and keep the conversation moving. This creates an illusion of normalcy. But internally, the effort required to maintain that illusion is exhausting, and over time, the cracks begin to show. Chapter 9. The emotional toll. No one talks about. Let's talk about something rarely discussed: the emotional experience of early dementia. Because in the early stages, people often know something is wrong. They feel it. They notice. Their memory slipping. Their thinking slowing down. Their confidence fading, but they can't fully explain it. And that creates a very specific kind of fear. Not panic, not immediate distress, but a quiet, creeping anxiety. Imagine this. You walk into a room and forget why you're there, then it happens again and again. At first, you laugh it off, but eventually you start asking yourself, what's happening to me? That question alone can be terrifying. And this fear often shows up as irritability, withdrawal, denial, defensiveness, because admitting something is wrong makes it real. Chapter 10. The family's blind spot. Now let's look at the other side, the family. Because families often miss the signs too, not because they don't care, but because they're too close. They see the person every day, so changes feel gradual, almost invisible. It's like watching a child grow. You don't notice it day to day, but someone who hasn't seen them in a year, they notice immediately. The same thing happens with dementia. A relative visiting after months might say, something seems off, but those who see the person daily might respond, no, they're fine. This is called gradual adaptation bias, and it's one of the biggest reasons early dementia goes undetected. Chapter 11. The danger of waiting too long. Here's where things become critical, because waiting has consequences. When dementia is caught late, treatment options are more limited. Progression is harder to slow, safety, risks increase. These risks include medication errors, financial mistakes, getting lost, poor decision-making. And by the time these risks become obvious, the condition is no longer in its early stage. That window, the most important window, has already passed. Chapter 12. What early intervention really looks like. Let's clear something up. Early intervention doesn't mean a miracle cure, but it does mean control. It means understanding what's happening, creating a plan, adjusting lifestyle factors. Doctors may recommend cognitive therapies, medications that support brain function, routine monitoring. But equally important are lifestyle changes, because the brain is not static. It responds to how you live. Chapter 13. The habits that protect your brain. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Your daily habits shape your brain's future. Here are some of the most powerful protective factors. 1. Physical movement. Regular exercise improves blood flow to the brain. Even simple walking can make a difference. 2. Mental stimulation. Reading, puzzles, learning new skills, these strengthen neural connections. 3. Social interaction. Isolation accelerates decline. Conversation keeps the brain engaged. 4. Nutrition. A diet rich in fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, and whole foods supports brain health. 5. Sleep. Poor sleep is strongly linked to cognitive decline. Your brain clears toxins while you sleep. Neglect these habits, and risk increases. Support them, and resilience improves. Chapter 14. The thin line between normal aging and dementia. One of the most confusing aspects of this topic is the overlap between normal aging and dementia. Let's make it simple. Normal aging, occasionally forgetting names, misplacing items, slower thinking, possible dementia, forgetting recently learned information consistently, losing track of conversations, getting confused in familiar places. The difference is not perfection versus imperfection. It's frequency and impact. If it disrupts daily life, it matters. Chapter 15. The role of denial. Denial plays a huge role in delayed diagnosis, not just from the individual, but from family members too. Because accepting the possibility of dementia is difficult. It forces people to confront loss of independence, long-term care decisions, emotional and financial realities. So instead, they delay, they wait, they hope it will go away. But dementia doesn't work that way. It progresses, whether you acknowledge it or not. Chapter 16. When to take action, the red line. So when should you act? Here's a simple rule. If you notice consistent patterns across multiple areas, memory, behavior, communication, that's your signal. Not one incident, not two, but a pattern. And when that pattern appears, don't wait, because early action is the difference between managing the condition and being overwhelmed by it. Final closing thought: dementia doesn't begin with a crisis. It begins with a whisper, a missed word, a forgotten moment, a subtle change in behavior, and most people ignore it until it becomes something they can't ignore anymore. But you don't have to wait for that moment. You don't have to let it reach that stage, because now you know what to look for. And sometimes, awareness alone is the most powerful first step. Chapter 17. The small tests you can do at home. Now that you understand the early warning signs, you might be wondering, is there any way to check this at home? The answer is yes, but with an important note. These are not diagnoses. They are early indicators, simple observations that can help you decide whether it's time to seek professional evaluation. Here are a few subtle, real-life tests you can pay attention to. 1. The conversation. Recall test: have a normal conversation. Then, after 10-15 minutes, gently ask about something that was discussed. If the person remembers clearly, likely normal struggles, but recalls with hints, monitor has no memory at all. Potential concern 2. The multi-step task test. Ask them to do something with 2 to 3 steps, like, please get the keys from the table, lock the door, and bring me the phone. Watch for skipping steps, doing them out of order, forgetting halfway. This reflects executive function. 3. The orientation check. Casually ask, what day is it? What month are we in? Occasional hesitation is normal. Consistent confusion is not. 4. The word retrieval moment. During conversation, notice if they pause frequently, replace simple words with vague descriptions, get visibly frustrated trying to speak. This is one of the earliest subtle signs. These are not meant to scare you. They are meant to open your eyes. Chapter 18. The role of stress, anxiety, and burnout. Now here's something very important. Not all cognitive issues mean dementia. In fact, many people experience similar symptoms due to chronic stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation, burnout. These conditions can mimic early cognitive decline. For example, stress can cause forgetfulness. Anxiety can disrupt focus, poor sleep can impair memory. This is why context matters. If someone is going through a stressful period, their symptoms may improve once that stress is managed. But dementia-related changes tend to persist and progress, regardless of circumstances. So the key question is, are things getting better or slowly getting worse? That answer tells you everything. Chapter 19. The silent progression. Why it feels so slow. One of the reasons people delay action is because dementia doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, almost quietly. Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. And during that time, the brain is changing. Connections weaken, signals slow down, functions decline. But because the change is gradual, it feels manageable, until suddenly, it isn't. That's the illusion of slow progression. It gives you time, but it also takes advantage of that time if you don't act. Chapter 20. Protecting dignity and independence. Let's talk about something deeply human: dignity. When people think about dementia, they often focus on memory, but what matters just as much is independence, the ability to make decisions, manage daily life, feel in control. Early detection helps preserve that independence for longer, because it allows planning ahead, setting up support systems, making decisions while the person can still participate. Without early awareness, these decisions are often made too late, and that can lead to confusion, frustration, and loss of control. But when caught early, the person remains part of the process, and that changes everything. Chapter 21. The role of family conversations. One of the hardest but most important steps is starting the conversation. Not confrontation, not accusation, conversation. Instead of saying, "You're forgetting things," try, "I've noticed a few changes and I just want to make sure everything's okay." The tone matters, because early dementia can make people defensive, not because they're difficult, but because they're scared. Approach with calmness, empathy, patience, and most importantly, respect, because behind every symptom, there is a person trying to hold on to who they are. Chapter 22. What most people regret. If you speak to families who have gone through this journey, you'll hear a common theme. We wish we had taken it seriously earlier. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't recognize the signs in time. They assumed it was normal. They waited. And by the time they acted, they felt like they were playing catch-up. This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. So you don't have to look back and say the same thing. Final extended reflection. Dementia doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like a slow fog. At first, it's barely noticeable. A slight blur, a small confusion, a moment you brush off. But over time, that fog thickens. And what was once clear becomes uncertain. That's why early awareness matters so much. Because you don't fight the fog when it's already dense. You notice it when it first appears. You recognize it. You respond to it. And you take action before it takes more than it should. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about memory. It's about identity, relationships, quality of life. And the earlier you protect those things, the longer they stay intact.